In this video, we're going to continue to build up some detail here for our height map. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create another noise here. So I'm going to hit the space bar, and in the search field, I'm going to do a search for dirt. And you'll notice here that we have dirt 1 through 5. The node I'm going to use in this case is going to be dirt 4. So I'm going to left click to create this node. Now, I'm going to double click to view this in the 2D view. Let's zoom in and let's just talk about some of my reasoning behind why I'm using this. So again, it's just a matter of just kind of personal preference, but one of the things that I actually like about this pattern is some of these kind of streaks or kind of line patterns that you see here. So if we take a look, you can see here's one that's kind of dark, and again, here's some here as well. And so these patterns are going to help establish more of this dirt ground look that I'm going for. So we're going to use dirt. What I'm going to do here is start to integrate this down with the blend that we had from the previous video. So one thing I can do here with my 2D view, instead of zooming constantly, if I just hit F on the keyboard, that'll focus the view to fit the window. All right, so I'm going to hit the space bar and I'm going to grab my blend here. Let's take the dirt 4 and we're going to place this into the foreground. And let's come over here to the blend. We're going to take the output and place that into the background. We'll double click to make sure we're viewing this here in our 2D view. Now, for the blending mode, I'm going to switch this to subtract. I'd like to subtract this dirt 4 from the result that we have in this previous blend. So what I'm going to do here for the blending mode is just set this to subtract. Now what I'm going to do is just simply lower the opacity value, as you can see here. So that we can visualize what we're doing here in our 3D view, we're just going to redistribute our connection lines. So to do that, we'll hold down the Shift key once again, left click on the output of this blend. This is the blend that's already connected here to our normal and our ambient occlusion as well as our base material. And we are just going to connect it here to this new blend. As you can see, that just kind of reroutes everything. So now, here in my 3D view, we're starting to see the result, but it is pretty intense, even though we are actually adjusting our opacity to a pretty low value. So what I would like to do at this stage, if we go back to this dirt here, I'm just going to double click to view this in my 2D view. You can see that we have the tonal range represented by these gray values. Now what I'd like to do is basically kind of adjust these tonal ranges, and there's a lot of ways we can do that here in Designer. One of the most familiar ways is just to use a simple level control. So what I'd like to do is insert a level operation between this dirt and this blend. Now if I want to insert a node, I can simply left click to select a connection line and either use my spacebar menu, or in this case, I could just come up here to the top of the toolbar and just click this levels node. Since I had the connection line enabled, you can see the levels node has been inserted between the dirt 4 and the blend foreground input. Now I can come over here to this levels node, and I'm just going to simply adjust my output white value. Here we're seeing the levels as a histogram, and here is my output white control. I'm simply going to just left click and drag this value here towards output black. And by doing that, you can see where I'm able to lessen the effect that I'm getting here from this dirt by simply adjusting the overall value range from this noise. So now it just becomes a matter of going back here to my blend to finally tweak the result to get exactly what I want to get here. So for example, I might just leave the opacity around 0.11. If I zoom in here in my 3D view, we can see what this noise is doing for us and some of these patterns we've now introduced. Again, here we can see some of these kind of streaks or lines, and that they've been subtracted from that original blend. So now we'll come over here. I'm just going to select some of my nodes and just kind of reorganize my network here, make sure that we can easily visualize what's happening. Now don't forget, we can rotate our 3D view, but we can also rotate the environment as well. So as a reminder, that's just using the Shift control and the right mouse button left to right to adjust the environment lighting. And so it's good to do this as we work so that we can get an idea of how the lighting is interacting with the shapes that we're creating here in our height map. So let's continue to add some additional noises here to further flesh out this height map. So what I'm going to do now, again, just finishing up a little bit of reorg here of these nodes, is we're going to add another noise, another dirt noise. This time we're going to add dirt 3. So here I'll hit the space bar, do a search for dirt, and now I'm going to use this dirt 3 noise. So I'll left click, and we've created this noise here. Now this noise, the reason I'm using this one, if we take a look here in our 2D view, this one's giving us what looks like dirt in some of these kind of clumping patterns like this. And so we're going to use this to create what we can think of as some kind of low-level like dirt clods or like pebbles or something like that. So with this dirt here, this dirt 3, what we're going to do is I'm going to hit the space bar and I'm going to create a blend. So we're going to end up using a blend here as well. But I'm definitely going to want to kind of pre-process some of this data here. So to do this, first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually blur some of this a bit. So I'm going to hit my space bar, and you'll notice here that we have this blur. So we're going to use this one. There's actually two types of blur here in Designer. We have this blur, which is part of the atomic nodes and is considered to be a less computationally heavy blur. So it's kind of cheap to use, but it does have some quality artifact issues. But in our case, with the ground, it doesn't really matter. So we're going to use this blur here. So now I'm going to take the output of the dirt. We'll plug this here into our blur. And here we're viewing the result of this blur in the 2D view. It's way too intense right now, so for the parameters, we're going to drag this down quite a bit. So here we are at a value of 0. Let me zoom in really close to get a better idea of what I'm doing, and I'm just going to increase this blur. So really what I'm trying to do is, instead of having a lot of these more visual kind of sphere-like patterns, I really just want to make these more into kind of like a little blob-like pattern here. So we're going to get something like this. Now, when we look at this, we have a lot of noise here. And one way that we can kind of get rid of some of this would be to just process the value ranges here, a lot of these grayscale tones, with the simple levels. So here I'm going to hit my space bar, and I'm going to create a levels. So let's hook our blur into our levels. And then I'm just going to play around a bit here with the histogram. Here towards the top, I have my input black and white. Let's make a little adjustment here. And then I'm also going to play around with my output white. So we'll drop this value and maybe do a little bit of a gamma adjustment. Basically, that will help me to kind of clamp out or remove some of those gray values. So this is kind of more of what we're getting here if we do this. So here's what we had before, this is with the blur, and here's what we have after using the levels. So now I'd like to take this new noise that I've created here with these 3 nodes and integrate that to the blend that we just created previously. So we're going to take the result of this levels into the foreground of a new blend. We're going to take the result of our blend, which is currently plugged into our base material and our normal and ambient occlusion. We're going to use this as the background here. And because I would like these new shapes that I have, I'd like these to have positive or more of an additive effect to the height that we have, I'm going to switch this blending mode, in this case, to screen. So it's going to screen them on top of what we have previously. Now, the value is pretty intense, so in this case, I'm just going to use the opacity just to lower that back. So we'll do something like that. Now again, we need to make sure that we visualize this in our 3D view, so we're just going to redistribute our connection line. Hold down Shift, left click, and here you can see I'm just redistributing that connection line here to the output of this new blend. Now I'm starting to see the results here in my 3D view, and you can see our shapes now compositing or blending in with the noise that we've created from our previous height. This gives us kind of the idea of some larger kind of clumped dirt areas like we have. Then, of course, I can come back here to my opacity and I can kind of play around with some of this if I want to increase or decrease the overall effect. Also, I can come back here to my levels and make some changes here as well. So for example, I'm just going to play around with the histogram and see what I can get. All right, so we're just going to leave things kind of like this here for now. One of the beauties about using this kind of node network is that everything's connected non-linearly. It's easy for us to see what's happening here just by using this visual node reference, and then we can always go back and change anything at any time. Everything is completely non-destructive. Okay, so the last thing I want to do is just add a grunge map to this overall height so that we can further kind of break this up. So what I'm going to do here is hit my space bar, and I'm going to start to do a search here for grunge, and you can see that this filters all of the grunge maps that we ship. So we have several of these procedural grunge maps. And the one I'm going to go with here is going to be this grunge map 15. So let's select this grunge map, and it's created here. Now the reason why I'm going with this one is because you can see here, if we take a look at the entire grunge map, I like that we have kind of this dark area, this light area. We also have, like I said, some kind of raised areas. If we look at this in terms of like a height map, here we also have, again, some of these almost like kind of scratch or rake marks here, which is going to look really cool for our dirt ground. So this grunge map just happens to have some properties within it that I think is going to work pretty good for the ground. All right, so let's make some room here. So we're going to select these nodes and just move them over. And we're going to just do what we have been doing, just integrating this grunge here to our blend that we have thus far. So to do that, we are going to hit the space bar, create a blend. Let's take the result of this grunge map, and we're going to place this here into the foreground. Let's take the result of our blend that we've been working with up until this point into the background. Now, for this, you could use all kinds. Like I said, there's always more than one way to do this, but for me, I'm just going to drop this down to a screen once again, and then just lower the opacity quite a bit. So now we're just going to get something like this. Okay, so here I'm just going to redistribute my connection lines just using my shift left click method. So shift left click, redistribute the connection line. It's going to pipe everything out to our 3D view. So now you can see we're starting to see some of these kind of like rake lines here in our ground, which is pretty cool. This is actually, again, a little too intense for me, so what I think I'm going to do is just lower this opacity like this here. So I'm using a pretty low value. Again, you can always tweak this to get the exact look that you want. All right, so if we kind of zoom out here on our graph, we can see here that we have our large shapes. Then we have this section here of our node network where we're starting to work on some of our kind of medium and small level shapes. So here I'm just setting this up so it's kind of easy to visualize. Let's left click and drag a selection around all of these nodes here, and then I'm just going to frame them. So here at the top of the menu or toolbar, I'm just going to click the frame button, puts a frame around everything so that we can just label it. And I'm going to call this, well, this is going to be 01 because this is kind of like a first part of this overall kind of medium small shapes. And I'll just hit enter for now. So we're just going to call this 01 for now because we're going to continue to build upon this in the next video.